Hi, I'm Reggie Brooks, Executive Director of the Holtz Heroes Foundation, and welcome to the Zorich Podcast as we celebrate Black History Month and some of the legendary players from the Lou Holtz era.
Welcome, everyone, to a special edition of the Zorich Podcast. I teamed up with Holtz Heroes Foundation, and we're going to be celebrating Black History Month. We'll be bringing you some very interesting and amazing student athletes from Notre Dame during the Lou Holtz era, and these individuals have become instant legends. One of those amazing student athletes, and I say student athletes because he has a doctor now, but that's a whole different conversation, was Tom Carter, one of the best, I think one of the best, part of the best recruiting class in modern day era. That takes huge humility because we were, but apparently there was someone after us that they wound up killing it, and had a chance to spend some time in the NFL, first round draft pick. Again, one of those classes that we really have to talk about. So let's kind of get into that first. You were part of this amazing recruiting class. That was the class of 1990, correct?
Yeah, correct.
And just kind of throw out some of the names that were kind of in that class that you happened to rub shoulders with and hang out in the locker room with.
You know, we came in with a lot of hypes around our class. Obviously, you had Jerome Bettis, right? Oliver Gibson was the player of the year. And then you had a guy named Bryant Young coming in. And, of course, you got Aaron Taylor, Jeff Burris, Tim Ruddy. And, everyone was properly advertised when they came to campus. So it was just amazing. It was just a great class, and we're still all very tight today.
Oh, that is absolutely amazing. And I guess here's the big question. How good did you think you guys were? Did you guys hey, obviously there were, I was there. So we had some success a couple years before you guys came. Right. And then, just kind of looking at assessing the talent. When you guys went back to the dorm, you're like, oh, I could beat that guy out. Oh, please, that guy, he ain't nothing.
No, crazy. It was the opposite. We came in because of what you guys built, right? The T-Lights, Chris Zorich,
Sure.
And so we came in. We were not mature yet. I think BY and Flan maybe were 240, and you the grown man at 280, whatever you were. And we
right.
We were just in awe, and I saw T-Light over here. I'm like, okay, I'm a 170-pound kid, and T-Light is almost 190, and just pretty and flowing. So we knew. I would think you guys were the standards, and it's like, okay, if I want to get there, I got to put my time in. So that's kind of what we felt, and we felt if we developed and got mature, we can get there.
And it's so interesting because I know that we've felt that for the guys kind of from my class and the year we won the national championship. We didn't realize we were that good until, years later, until you realize, because we thought, we're dumb, young, naive kids. We think this is going to happen every year. And we didn't realize how good we were until, like I said, years later. Was that kind of the way you guys felt?
Yeah, once again, we had you guys in front of us. I think you won the Lombard that year. T-Light was, so it's like we knew the model. Right. And coming out of high school, it wasn't, when I watched Jerome in high school, it wasn't fair. Right. I'm like, that should be illegal. And I see BY in high school. I'm like, they're men, and we all came in as like grown men and just little baby bodies. And so what Coach Holtz did, he required the mental aspect. Obviously, he does all the same things with us. So once we got mentally strong enough, and you combine that mental with the physical, we knew we had some pretty special talent.
Well, this is in honor of Black History Month, and really want to talk about kind of what your experience was as a Black student athlete at Notre Dame. I know one of the issues oftentimes that the regular students had, oftentimes I talked to them, there were several Black students in my dorm in Soren, and they talked about how they hated game weekends because when they would walk around campus, people would go up to them and say, "Hey, are you Tom Carter? Are you Rocket Ishmael?" You know, and it was kind of one of those things where it was kind of an odd experience. But one of the things we're concentrating on through the Holtz Heroes Foundation is kind of talking about that experience. I mean, talking about kind of the good and the bad. So what was your experience like as a Black student athlete at Notre Dame?
Very similar to yours, Chris, right? I had a great environment in my dorm. And, you know, to be honest, we were in a bubble. As a football guys, you know, no matter how much Holtz tried to normalize us with the no name, the Luchettas, you know, the no name on the shorts, the gray t-shirts. So I know he did his best to keep us, you know, and us staying with, you know, I call them, you know, other students.
Sure.
That helped. But I did see, you know, other African Americans who didn't have my experience. Because we were, you know, I was in practice all day. We fly, stay in hotels. We, you know, so it was a different experience. So, you know, I think my college roommate, you know, they were great. Even Father Jenkins was 2 doors down.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I stayed in room 345, and Father Jenkins was a couple doors down in the hallway.
That's crazy.
So,
was he the rector at the time, or what?
He wasn't the rector. He was just one of the priests staying. The rector stayed downstairs.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he was just, you know, just coming out of his training, or still in his training.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was so that was my experience. And obviously I knew coming in, you know, being a Florida kid, you know, my high school team was basically all Black. You know, I went to Miami on a recruiting trip to Florida State. So I had the opportunity to be in that, you know, I wanted to come to Notre Dame for something different.
Sure.
And did I ever learn culturally? You know, we're going to Hawaii, we're going to Ireland, you know, every place we go, we're rock stars. So I knew what I was getting when I came to South Bend.
So one of the things that you talked about just a couple seconds ago was kind of coming from this all Black environment, talking about Miami, other schools. I mean, how was it when you returned home now? So I know I had a different experience when I returned home from like maybe your first year, your first summer. What was that experience?
I think it was reverse peer pressure, right? You know, because obviously all our freshman year, we struggled with the academics, the pressures of playing. I'm like, man, do I really want to be here? It's my first time being in snow. So my brain was like, man, in Miami, it's 85 degrees in December. Maybe I need to go down, you know, all these things. But when I go home, I'm getting all this praise. Wow, you're at Notre Dame, you know, us Notre Dame and Stanford guys, we get the smart. Oh, you're smart. This is, you know, you love it. I'm like, okay, yeah, I do love it. Yeah. So it's kind of one of those things to where you don't get a chance to see how big the university is until you come from outside of those walls.
You know, you're exactly right. Because I remember my first year coming back, and I mean, I grew up with my friends in my neighborhood, loved them, and spending that 1 year and then kind of coming back to my old neighborhood, my conversations were different. Not the way I spoke, but just kind of the things that I thought were important. And that was just a short time, you know, just a year, and it was that much of a difference. And so I could totally understand what you're talking about, because, and not that the conversations that I had before I went to Notre Dame were bad. It just, they were different. Like, you know, I was talking about graduating from college. You know, I was talking about, you know, experiencing different things, and I've only been away for a year.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what you grow up a lot. And for me, my first time on the airplane was my recruiting trip to South Bend.
Wow.
So that's the background I come from. My mom worked 2-3 jobs. I'm the only child. So it's like, yeah, you do have a different perspective. And Pat Terrell, who's, you know, one of your guys, Pat went to my high school.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so Pat was my host. And the thing that sold me on Notre Dame was my recruiting trip. And Pat told me, hey, I got a job lined up in Chicago. I'm like, you do? Like, you know, and that was it. Wow. I wasn't thinking about playing pro ball. I'm thinking, hey, if I graduate, I'll get a great job. And that was, yeah. So that's what Notre Dame, that's the effect that it had me leaving the state.
See, and I think, things are so much different. I know you had a son that actually go through kind of literally the same experience you had a chance to go through, except he went to Stanford and he actually played in the NFL, which is amazing in itself. But when you talk about kind of the experience on why you went, right? Because I think nowadays, young people in the social media, again, you had a son to kind of go through it. Everybody talks about the pros, and it's like, well, wait a minute, you haven't had one practice in college yet. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I think that's just amazing. And, this is coming from a kid. I don't even know if they had stars when we were, being recruited. Yeah. But the idea that you had to prove yourself on the field kind of was important.
Yeah, it's very important. And you hit on the head, Chris. Now the young kids are getting so far ahead of themselves with the recruiting. I don't know if Tom Lemon was around when you came through, but Tom used to come down and write a little blurb,
right.
And that was we were rock stars.
Right. That was all at that point,
yes,
right?
Yeah. When I had a paragraph from Tom Lemon, you have arrived.
Oh my gosh.
And so now what I'm seeing now in colleges, these kids come in 5 stars and they don't know how to work. Or they experience failure for the first time because, i.e., we come to Notre Dame, we the biggest, baddest, and we see a Chris Zorich and a Todd Light, and it's like, you're nowhere near that. And you can't play. And so that it's affecting their confidence. So, maybe a little bit too much praise too early.
Sure.
They got to figure it out.
Well, and I think another one of the experiences that you just mentioned, I don't know what other visits you took, but I'm assuming your host probably didn't say, hey, I have a job lined up in XYZ city. So that's what I think is amazing about Notre Dame, white or black. I mean, you have a black player, Pat Terrell, who was involved in aviation, who, was thinking outside of the NFL. Again, guys weren't thinking about it that early, but for him to be your host and say, hey, I have this job lined up in Chicago. I mean, I would have been kind of like what you were talking about. I'd been like, wow, really? That's great.
Yeah. I was blown away. And I think that's what makes Notre Dame special because, like I said, it's not for everyone.
Sure.
Right. So I did go on my trips to Florida State and Miami, and they were what we thought they were. So coming to Notre Dame and just having a player recruit and taking a dinner, like, all right, I'll take you back to the hotel, have a good night. So it was one of those type.
Right.
And I really enjoy that. So it's just it is truly about coming there for the 4. For me, it was definitely 4 for 40, and it's paying off. We are the end piece of the 40 as I look back on it now.
No, exactly right. We're part of that 40, which is so amazing because I remember seeing the alumni come back with their crazy pants with, I think they were green pants, like the leprechauns, on the pants, and go, oh, what do those old guys know, right? Now that's us.
We are 30. Right? We 30 out now, brother. We 30 years out.
That's us now. And it's interesting because the perspective, and I wish I was smart enough to listen to those guys who were coming back, who were saying, hey, do this, do that. But, you're young, you got an ego. It's like, oh, what do you know? But now we're those guys, when we come back. And I'm assuming with your son having a chance to experience literally what you were able to experience, I'm assuming he was able to take that advice.
He took the advice, but I was still just dad, right? You know how it is. I'm just dad. So I relied on a lot of my close friends at the time. I said, hey, he said, Dad, you do this. You just tell me this because you're my dad. I'm like, no, I said, if you weren't good, I really wouldn't tell you this, but I promise you I would not. He's seen a lot of things in my years working at the NFLPA. So he's seen a lot. But we just try to give what we can, man.
So how do you feel your experience at Notre Dame prepared you for the NFL?
Big time. Primarily physically, right? If I'm going against Lake Dawson every day, if I'm going against Rocket Ismail every day, I got a speed, I got power, and I see Irv Smith at the tight end. You got a Derek Brown, then you got, Austin McBride. And then at one point, Chris, we had Dorsey Levens, Reggie Brooks, Tony Brooks, Rodney Culver.
Yes,
Ricky Waters. So this is what I saw every day in practice. And Coach Holtz, I tell everybody in practice, Coach Holtz would not allow the defensive backs to cut the running backs. He's like, don't cut my backs. I'm like, Coach, he's 230. I'm 180.
It's the only way.
That's the only way. So we got ran over every day. So talent-wise, when I got to the league, I was very prepared. And culturally-wise, just all the traveling and talking to different people prepared me to handle that side too.
Okay.
So, I was still green when I got to the league, but I felt okay.
So I know this is going to be kind of interesting for the folks who are watching and listening, but I'm assuming the same thing happened to you, because it happened to me when you came from Notre Dame and you were on that team. It was almost like, oh, you're that Notre Dame guy. Like you need to go to the front of the line, or you need to ask that. And I wound up being a player rep because of Notre Dame, right? They're like, well, you went to Notre Dame, you're smart. Why don't you be a player rep? And I was like, what? Huh? But it was kind of weird because like when anything happened, it was, well, go ask Chris. He's from Notre Dame. Did you experience that?
Always. And that's a stigma that we like, and we joke about it a lot too on the side.
Right.
Us and the Stanford guys, and but it is a badge, of honor, right? So that's something that our peers see in us because they know what we had to do to get into Notre Dame, or even to stay and compete there. So, and that's what I tell young people right now. It's like, it's just our society, right? We talk about having a doctor title in front of you. You talk about what neighborhood you come from, what school. Right. People are going to see you when you come through the front door. And, having Notre Dame behind your name is pretty good.
We like to thank Reggie Brooks, the executive director of the Holtz Heroes Foundation, to kind of organizing this. One of the things that the mantra of Coach Holtz was, again, when you're 18, it's a little different than when you get a little older, but can you talk about what his mantra of trust, love, and commitment means to you?
It means everything. Every relationship I had since Notre Dame, it's like, can I trust you? It doesn't make a difference what field you're in, right? If I'm coaching my son's little league team, I'm asking an 8-year-old kid, can I trust you to run this play?
Wow.
Right? If I'm at work, can I trust you to get this assignment done? So I've carried that forever. And love for me, there's only one person that gets affectionate love from me, and that's my wife. Everybody else I love as, as brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers, right? And so I think that's what Coach instilled in us, to have affection for people, to have empathy for people, that we love people, right? So I carry that every day. And commitment, you got to be committed. Anything, our relationship, you're a married guy, you understand what commitment means. So those things are not easy to do, especially being committed. All right, I'm in it. So obviously I take those very seriously. And, obviously through our faith, those just really line up to what I believe in.
And it's interesting because when you think about hearing that mantra as a 17, 18-year-old kid, and maybe not really understanding it at the time, because now it's just football, right? Because although I think one of the things that Coach Holtz did, which was amazing, was he kind of implemented those life lessons in his talks, right? Or the way we practiced and the things he did. And so when you talk about trust, love, and commitment, I mean, you're talking about a room of 105 men, boys, basically, and some men. And you're talking about love, like what is that, right?
Yeah,
but it's, do I love my brother? Do I love the guy next to me? Do I love the guy who's in the meeting room with me? Can I trust him? And I think when you combine trust, love, and commitment, it really changes as you get older, right? So now it's like, well, hey, I just want to know if I can depend on the guy who's next to me, right? Or does Jeff Burris know the call, because I need to be able to trust him because we have racket and practice, right? But then as you get older, as you mentioned, marriage is a commitment. When you talk about employees, is this employee committed? And then when you talk about coaching little league teams or kids, it's just so funny how that those simple 3 words means different things to you as you get older.
Absolutely. And, and for us that love part, talk about the locker room, and I know it's Black History Month, it taught us people are people if you know who they are. Right? It taught us, I'm a lot of next to this Tim Ruddy, this Jim Flanagan. I love these men. They're white men. I love them. And when that, as athletes, we all get a chance to experience that. I think people in the military do the same, right?
Exactly.
Because you're in the trenches, and you come out of the trenches, that's your brother.
Right.
That's my brother. And so I think that's why we do have an advantage sometimes over society, people who are in their myopic settings who don't get a chance to integrate. So, and that's this, we need to carry that forward and help others with the same love.
And I think that's so amazing. And I would love to kind of talk a little bit more about that. When you talk about the military, you talk about sporting teams. I mean, when you have a coach who wants you to win, and not necessarily X's and O's, because my high school coach, we didn't do very well record-wise, but he created men out of boys, out of knuckleheads, out of former gang members. I mean, he was, if not for him, have no idea where I'd be. But, it's those experiences, when you think about being in the trenches with someone, you don't care. When you're on the line with someone, when you're in practice with them, when you're throwing up, using the same garbage barrel, right? After running 100 wind sprints or doing whatever you have to do. I mean, that's your brother. Or your sister, regarding what sport you play in or participate in. But the idea that you're able to see beyond what a person's color may be. And I know my best friend, I met him in college, Tim Ryan. He's an offensive guard. We started off at linebackers. We both sucked. They moved us to different positions. And he was a white kid who went to Rockhurst in Kansas City, went to Catholic school, and went to Notre Dame. And I came from an economically challenged area in south side of Chicago. How does that happen, right? But it's that brotherhood that you talked about that I think is so special.
Yeah, it was very special. Same with all the guys on the team. My roommate that I had freshman year, we stayed together all the years. White guy, he's a doctor, orthopede, love him to death. We're brothers. His parents are my adopted white parents. Oh, wow. So they're, his mom, his grandmother to my kids. So it's like it's family. And that's get a little emotional about that, but yeah, that's what family is.
That's wonderful. Wanted to kind of save this question for one of the last ones, but what did you feel like, or I'm sorry, what was your feeling when you heard your name being called in the NFL draft? I mean, can you just kind of share that with us? Because that has to be an amazing experience.
It's an amazing experience. And I'm going to tell you Tom Carter's first world problems here. So it was a long day, Chris, because I didn't talk to anybody outside of the top 10 picks.
Wow. And
so obviously when the 10th pick came off the board, I was probably the sickest guy this side of Mississippi.
Wow.
Because I'm a kid. I'm like, oh no, I'm going to fall. Right. And so from pick 10, I think Jerome was pick 10. From pick 10 to pick 17, I just think I held my breath.
Wow.
And then it was like a blur. Back in the old days, it was the old phone, so I heard my phone. I had the long cord. I pulled the cord in. It was Emmett Thomas from the Redskins called, said, "Hey, we're gonna take it." My heart just like, thank God. And it was the rest of the day was a blur. I think Pat Terrell came over to my house and said, "Make sure you wear a suit." And so Pat told me to wear a suit, and literally a couple of hours later, I got on an airplane to go to DC.
Wow!
And that's all I remember from that day. And it was just, like I said, it was first world draft problems, but it was a crazy day.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of folks don't necessarily know that, right? They aren't there sitting on the couch with your family. They're not there. I know. I remember. I forgot who it was. I was talking to somebody about it, and they were out in the yard playing basketball.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that was their way of kind of working through. Hey, I haven't got that phone call yet. You know, all the times you pick up the phone and your boys are pranking you.
Yeah.
You know, you see that if there's a dial tone. I mean,
yes. Everything, man. It's just a lot of anxiety. Not, you know, things that we put names on today. Back then, we just like, hey, it was just, you know, it was just a lot of anxiety. So,
so, ladies and gentlemen, this is great. We're going to wrap it up with kind of this last question, and then this question is going to be asked to everyone. And we see that he's no longer Tom Carter; it's actually Dr. Tom Carter. And this is kind of going to really in depth of kind of what have you been doing recently? And I know you mentioned that you were working at the Players Association. Can you kind of share with us a little bit about maybe the last couple of years of your journey? Because I know you're actually doing something really interesting now, but I'd like you to share that with us.
Yeah, well, since retiring in 2001, I taught school for a little while. I was a high school teacher. And then in 2006, a man by the name of Gene Upshaw, who we both know, asked me to come on. Like you, I was a player rep also. The Notre Dame guy would just be the player rep. And so I was at the PA for 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah, 15 years, negotiated 2 CBAs, all the compliance, everything like that. So it was the best career for me because I had a chance to give back to all the young men, you know, men that walked in our shoes, right? Come from economically challenged backgrounds, have family, you know, issues. So I enjoyed doing that. And just recently in the past 4 or 5 months, I left the PA to start my own company. Still going toward those young men, helping this NIL space.
Okay.
So I'm just basically privatizing what I did at the union.
Sure.
To help out high school and college kids because there are a lot of predatory people out there that are trying to take advantage of these young men. So it is my goal just to, you know, to be that in that stead for them.
Talk, can you share a little bit about, you mentioned NIL. I know what it means. Can you just give us a little scenario on kind of what you guys are able to do?
Yeah, we just want to, obviously NIL, for those who know, is name, image, and likeness. And the best way I can put it, the golden goose of NIL is Michael Jordan.
Okay.
Every kid is trying to do what he did from his name. When you hear that name, when you see that image with the tongue wagging or the one knee brace, that's his image.
Sure.
And his likeness is when you see that, you know, his icon, his little, you know, logo. So that's name, image, and likeness. And so every kid is trying to capitalize on that now. And so, you know, our goal is to make sure that, you know, they're doing it properly. I'm down here in Florida right now. They're trying to pass legislation to, you know, for companies to sign kids past their college years, which is not, you know, not right, but that's just the way it's going right now. So we just want to make sure that it's kids are having a fair shake at it.
And so this legislation, the NIL legislation, was just passed by the NCAA. I want to say maybe a year ago, or just a little bit over. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's really an interesting space because my understanding is that they kind of put just a handful of rules in place and said, okay, you guys go figure it out.
Yes.
And what happens? I mean, you talked about being from, you know, single parent home, being 18 years old. What happens when you have somebody rolling through with a nice suit, big car, talking about, hey, you know, if you sign with XYZ school, I can give you this.
Yes, that's what's happening right now, Chris. And you know, you're right. The NCAA has thrown these young men to the wolves. You know, I don't get into this whole conversation, but basically, the NCAA was basically saying, you know, we don't want a revenue share, so we're going to just say protect our egg, and athletes, do whatever you got to do, take care of your own business. And so that's why I kind of feel that, you know, they take care of these men in so many other areas, but now they're just leaving them to fend for themselves. So that's where I step into that void, and I'm going to the institution and say, hey, you need to have someone protecting the kids.
Sure.
And also, if these kids' image gets damaged, it's going to damage your image also.
Right.
So yes, that's the state of it, and it's only going to get, as you see it, it's ramping up. right now, kids are signing deals, bad deals, good deals. Who knows what it's going to look like when it really hits 3 or 4 years.
And now the reason why you have to talk to the institutions, because part of the legislation was, hey, schools, you can't help. Right. And so technically the schools can't say, hey, there's a good deal or a bad deal. Right. All they could do is kind of monitor it. And I say that in air quotes because I don't even think they actually know what they can and can't do yet.
Yeah, they can and can't do it. And you see schools are creeping toward all these new things they're trying to do, raising funds, raising this.
Setting up LLCs.
But
again, not the school, but individuals associated with the school.
Yes, individuals associated with the school. So we are, that's why I say it's that space. And it's just, do the schools let these kids basically drown? That's what I'm seeing right now. So it's like, in the pros, when we were pros, we had all kinds of as union reps. We had agents, we had marketing reps, we had financial advisors. We had a team of people protecting us at 22, and we still didn't know nothing at 22. Notre Dame educated guys, it's tough business. So how are you expecting a 16, 17-year-old kid to live in that same space? So
thank you for doing what you're doing, because that is a space where young people are being taken advantage of, because, and I know it was going on before kind of all this legislation, but just think about when it became legal, right? When you had and then oftentimes a lot of these kind of crazy situations are almost with the parents as well, right? Hey, the parents want something out of it. Hey, give me a car, give me some swag, give me some shoes, give me some money.
Yes.
And all of a sudden it's like, here's this 17, 18-year-old kid going, what's going on?
What is going on? And it's so crazy now because in high schools, it's only like 2 or 3 states that allow high school kids to do it. And so that's what we run into right now. So these kids, whether that's golf, tennis, these young guys are young 5-star athletes. If they do something, they might not be able to play high school ball now. So, that's why, I don't know where it's going to end up, Chris. Right now, it's just pretty open, and nobody's really, everyone's really scared to touch it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we know at least some of it that down in Florida is in good hands with you being involved. So thank you very much. I want to thank you. I want to thank Reggie for allowing us to kind of make this happen. This was his idea. I think it's a great chance for folks to have a chance just a couple minutes, kind of learn what's going on with some of our former athletes, kind of what their experience was at Notre Dame. Oftentimes people may think that everything was kind of perfect, nice and rosy in school, outside of being an athlete. And I know that there are some experiences that folks they weren't kind of that positive, but this is kind of a great environment to allow folks to kind of hear about that. So thank you very much for taking out the time, Dr. Tom Carter. Reggie obviously is also thankful as well. He is the executive director of the Holtz Heroes Foundation. We also want to thank Coach Holtz for creating this type of environment to kind of allow us 10, 15, 20 years later to kind of talk about those life lessons we learned when we were 18.
Yes. Well, appreciate you, brother Chris.
Absolutely, man. All right. Go Irish.
All right.